Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, founder of Thrive Meetings and Events and this podcast. On the show, we talk to experts in all facets of food and beverage to understand how we can collectively work together to create safe, inclusive, and sustainable food and beverage experiences. My goal is for everyone to be able to sit down at a meal together and enjoy that meal and that experience without worrying about potentially dying or being left out or leaving hangry or being offended by the food and beverage that is being served. I also want to make sure that everybody can get to the table with it, whether they utilize a wheelchair or a scooter or visually impaired, hearing impaired. I want to make sure everybody has access to that meal because it's not just what's on the plate, it's how we get to the plate. And I'm excited for this month. This is May, and May is Food Allergy Awareness Month and Celiac Disease Awareness Month. And this is the first time that the podcast has been fallen over this month. So I have loaded up all of my guests for the month to talk about different aspects of food allergies as well as celiac disease. While I've got a slew of experts here to talk to you all month long about different aspects of food allergies as well as celiac disease, I wanted to give you a little precursor of what they both are and why we need to pay attention to them. So let's get started. Food allergies. I just want to give you some basic facts. Food allergy is a potentially life-threatening medical condition. It's where the immune system attacks the proteins in a food that normally you would think is harmless, but that person's specific body deems it as danger, like Danger Will Rogers. And the body goes after that food and says, get out of my body, stop touching my body, stop coming into my body. I don't want you here. And what we see that as is our reactions. And those reactions can trigger any one of our bodily systems. So the cardiovascular system, the digestive tract, the immune system. It can attack multiple systems, our skin. And so we see it in hives. We see it in throat closure or lip swelling or brain fog or vomiting or diarrhea, a variety of different symptoms. And every time somebody has an allergic reaction, their reaction actually may be different from the last time. And maybe it's even stronger than it was, meaning it's hitting a couple of the different systems. And when it does hit a couple of the different systems at the same time, that's called anaphylaxis. And it could lead to potentially dying from that reaction. Or there have been reports of people who've, remained in a coma for days and months because of their anaphylactic reaction. It's pretty scary. The statistics around it, and you'll hear this from Dr. Ruchi Gupta next week, is that 1 in 10 American adults has a food allergy. That's 10% of the population. And her research that came out in 2009 talks about that and shows us how prevalent food allergies actually are. And 1 in 8 kids actually have food allergies from her research as well. So it's pretty prevalent. And a lot of times we just discount it as an intolerance or somebody just doesn't like something. But it is actually a real medical condition that could cause somebody to die. There are more than 170 foods that are known to cause allergic reactions. People can be allergic to anything. They can be allergic to pineapple and avocado and maybe escargot, but there are 9 foods that cause 90% of all allergic reactions. There's only 9 foods that cause 90% of allergic reactions. Did you get that? And those 9 foods are wheat, soy, egg, milk, which is also called dairy, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, and sesame. Again, those 9 foods cause 90% of all allergic reactions. Now think about menus that you order for your different meetings. If you're ordering it from the local pizza joint or the deli or even from a hotel or convention center, those items are pretty much in everything that we typically order for our breakfasts and breaks and lunches. And so we need to be really cognizant about what we're serving people. A couple of other statistics and information about food allergies is that food allergy reactions can happen within 2 minutes, but up to 2 hours later. So they may have been, ate at your event and then gone to their room or gone home and their reaction happens then. But most times it happens pretty darn fast. And the other scary statistic about that is that every 3 minutes, someone is sent to the emergency room with a food allergy reaction. So if you do the math, that's 20 people an hour that go to an ER around the country because of a food allergy reaction. And with 10% of your attendee base, that could actually be, if you only have 100 people, that could be all 10 of your people that have food allergies. That could go to, have that happen to them at your event. Now, the other aspect of food allergies that I want to talk about is how the reactions can be triggered. And I've talked about this before, and I'm sure you've seen it, but the 3 different ways are by consumption, and that's actually eating the food, and that is actually the most common way for a food allergy reaction to be triggered. But people can also have a reaction by touching the food or touching the oil from a food and thinking about, if I'm shaking your hand and you just had your hand in the peanut jar, or you just ate raw shrimp and you shook my hand, or you kissed me after having eaten that can actually cause an allergic reaction. And then the third way is with inhalation. And this is probably the least common way to have an allergic reaction, especially an anaphylactic one. But think about inhaling the proteins of that food. And it really comes into play when you're cooking food. And that means that you have an action station and that chef is really doing this really cool and fun thing with, sauteing shrimp and pasta or grilling fried eggs or making a frothy drink with milk. What happens is that the proteins from that food get into the air. It's not necessarily just sniffing the smell of it, but it's the proteins that are being cooked that come out into the aroma of that food, and somebody can actually inhale that and cause an allergic reaction. So it's really important when somebody tells you that they have a food allergy that you ask how that reaction is typically triggered. Do we need to avoid having tree nuts inside the entire meeting room or apples? Do we need to make sure that there's no apples in the entire space because that could actually cause an allergic reaction? So those are some really, I think, the most important facts about food allergies that we as meeting professionals need to understand. It is a potentially life-threatening medical condition. 10% of our adult attendees have food allergy, true food allergies that could potentially kill them. There are 9 foods that are responsible for 90% of all allergic reactions. And those 9 foods, again, are wheat, soy, egg, milk, which is also dairy, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, and sesame. And then just paying attention to the reaction times. They can happen within 2 minutes to 2 hours. So we don't want to be sending somebody to the emergency room every 3 minutes from our event. So we need to be paying attention to what we're serving it, how we're serving it, so that we don't cause allergic reactions with the food that we're serving. Oh, and one little final note on food allergies. I did a video the other day showing about the sesame seed allergy. It actually just became one of the top 9 allergens on April 24th here in the US. But the sesame seed is a little tiny thing. It's a little tiny seed. Think about that. That little tiny seed could actually send somebody to the emergency room. And Dr. Gupta's got some research on sesame allergies, which actually helped make sesame the top 9th allergy here in the US. But that little tiny sesame seed, that's also bigger than a crumb. And a crumb can cause an allergic reaction in someone. So we need to make sure that we're talking to our catering partners, food service providers on how they're preparing the food, how are they displaying the food, because you don't want to put the same items in the same baskets, etc. So that's my spiel on food allergies. And now I want to talk a little bit about celiac disease as well, because this is also Celiac Disease Awareness Month. So the difference between celiac disease and food allergies is an immune system response, where celiac disease is a genetic autoimmune disease that impacts the digestive system. And what happens when somebody has celiac disease, basically, if they continue to eat gluten, which is the main and triggering fact with celiac disease, is that it starts to destroy their digestive tract. And when you're thinking about the digestive tract, think about the inside of your intestines. They have these little things called villi. And a better perception of that is thinking of a shag rug, right? And those villi are working. And when the food comes down into the digestive tract, the food gets broken down and the villi absorb the nutrients in the food and then spreads that around the rest of the body so that we can get nourished through the food that we're eating. Well, if they've got celiac disease, the villi are disappeared and the intestines are not able to actually digest the food and absorb those nutrients in it. The villi are actually pretty much flat like a piece of paper. And so the only way to reinvigorate those villi is to go on a gluten-free diet, and 100% gluten-free diet. And those villi can come back and be regentrified and help the body absorb the nutrients. So the disease is actually, besides being a genetic autoimmune disease, celiac disease is also a disease of malabsorption and malnutrition. So think about that. The statistics for the number of people who have celiac disease is 1 in every 100 people. So it's about 1% of the community, but 89% of those people probably have not been diagnosed with celiac disease. They've been going to the doctor because they have brain fog or they have stomach aches or they have body aches of all sorts, and they can't pinpoint it. The average diagnosis timeframe for celiac disease is anywhere from 4 to 7 years. And the average age for being diagnosed with celiac disease is 45. Can you think about eating your entire life and you've got brain fog or you've got different body aches and headaches and migraines and stomach issues, and you're going to all these different doctors and they have no idea what is causing it, and it ends up being celiac disease, and all you need to do, quote unquote, all you need to do is remove gluten from your diet? It's that simple. Oh my gosh, that's just kind of amazing to me that it takes that long to get diagnosed. So the only treatment for celiac disease is to eat a 100% gluten-free diet. And if you didn't know what gluten is a protein that's found in wheat, rye, and barley. Literally just wheat, rye, and barley. And there's there's different forms of wheat that contain gluten, but because wheat's a very overarching word, or overarching grain, but there's a variety of different wheats out there, but they all contain gluten. And so we need to understand when we're ordering food and beverage, where is gluten found? We need to pay attention to the labeling of prepackaged food that we're buying. Is it labeled gluten-free? And a note for both food allergies and celiac disease is that the Food Allergy Labeling and Consumer Protection Act of 2004 actually requires that manufacturers label their food if it contains the top 9 allergens. Well, top 8 until April 24th. Sesame has to be started to be labeled as of January 2023. But you must label your food, prepackaged food, if it contains any of those 9 allergens. And that includes if it says whey or casein, which means milk. You have to label it in layman terms. Now, the regulations for celiac disease don't fall under the Food Allergy Labeling and Consumer Protection Act. There's a different regulation on celiac or on gluten-free labeling, and it requires that to be deemed gluten-free, it has to have less than 20 parts per million of gluten in it. And 20 parts per million is probably about the size of a sesame seed or smaller, but it has to have less than that. And so we need to make sure that the food that we're eating has been certified gluten-free, so it's gone through the proper testing to be named that. So that's some different facts about food allergies and celiac disease that I want to start you off with for the month. Who I've got lined up this month are Chef Dominique Teague, who is executive chef at a hotel and restaurant in London. A couple of years ago, he actually took his restaurant completely dairy-free and gluten-free. And you'll be surprised about how much more money he made by doing that. And he didn't even tell people he did it. And also what I love to know, or what I found out, is that his employee satisfaction rates went up. So his servers and his cooks were so much happier working in that environment than they were before. So definitely check that out. That actually came out last week. So listen to that episode. It is episode, I think it's 71. And then coming up after me next week and through the rest of the month, I've got Dr. Ruchi Gupta, who is one of the experts in food allergies. She's got some statistics and some information on studies that she's doing around food allergies. I've got Erica Derma, who is Celiac and the Beast, to talk about celiac disease, and Chef Keith Norman from Las Vegas talking about it. And I've got Chef Assiter Reed, who teaches cooking classes for hospitals and for kids programs, talking about how she helps kids with food allergies eat and how parents can actually make food for kids that are free from. So there's a lot of great content coming up this month to celebrate food allergy awareness and celiac disease awareness month. Check us out on Facebook at Eating at a Meeting Facebook community. You can also check out live interviews with some of these guests Wednesdays at 12 o'clock. And then otherwise you can find them on all podcast platforms. Again, thank you for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I appreciate your time and all of the people that you're feeding and having dinner with or lunch with. I really appreciate you learning more about food allergies and celiac disease. Until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.